The laughter was bright and cruel, echoing through the Bavarian lodge's great hall like champagne glasses shattering on marble, and Sophia Oakes felt her knees hit the parquet floor hard enough to make her teeth click together. "Oh God, she's actually crying," someone said above her, voice lilting with amusement. And that was the worst part, she wasn't crying. Her eyes were just watering from where her shoulder had wrenched when the tall blonde noble yanked her sideways. She'd been carrying a tray of crystal goblets filled with something dark and sweet-smelling, and now the liquid was spreading across the floor in a puddle that looked black in the candlelight. 5 minutes to dawn," another voice called out, male and drunk-sounding. "That's barely sporting." "It's tradition," the blonde one said. He was standing over her now, and Sophia could see his shoes were handmade, probably worth more than she'd earn in a year working at this isolated lodge hidden in the forests south of Munich. "The chase begins when the first servant falls. Those are the rules." Sophia pressed her palms against the floor, trying to push herself up. Her wrist throbbed where she'd landed on it. The great hall was full of them tonight, maybe 30 young nobles dressed in silk and velvet, their skin uniformly pale, their hair ranging from white blonde to silver white, and their eyes glittering with the particular excitement that came before the chase. She'd worked at the lodge for 3 years and had learned to recognize that look. "Should we give her a head start?" a woman asked, and more laughter rippled through the room. Sophia got one knee under herself. The blonde noble, she thought his name was Klaus, put his foot on her shoulder. Not hard, just enough pressure to keep her down. "Stay there a moment. Let everyone get a good look." Her face burned. There were other servants in the room, pressed against the walls, holding empty trays, their expressions carefully blank. She'd trained herself to wear that same expression, but right now her control was cracking. 3 years of documenting this, 3 years of careful notes hidden in the margins of her folklore research, 3 years of watching people she worked alongside come back bleeding or not, come back at all, and she was about to become just another entry in her own ledger. Then the laughter stopped. It didn't fade, it cut off, clean as a knife through silk. Sophia felt the pressure leave her shoulder. She heard Klaus take a step backward, his handmade shoes scuffing on the floor. "Your Majesty," someone said, and their voice was completely different now, stripped of all that casual cruelty and replaced with something that might have been fear. Sophia turned her head, still on her hands and knees, and saw him. He was standing in the doorway at the far end of the great hall, and the first thing she noticed was that he wasn't dressed like the others. They wore silk and velvet in jewel tones. He wore black, simple and severe, with no ornamentation except a silver pin at his collar. His hair was white, falling to his shoulders, and his face was the kind of beautiful that made you forget to breathe sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and eyes so dark they might have been black. He was looking directly at her. The hall was completely silent now. Sophia could hear her own breathing, too fast and shallow. The Vampire King, because that's what he had to be. No one else would make a room full of nobles freeze like rabbits sensing a wolf walked forward. His steps were quiet but deliberate, and every person in the room tracked his movement. He stopped 3 feet from where Sophia was still crouched on the floor, and for a moment she thought he was going to speak, to say something that would make this make sense. Instead, he lowered himself down, not into a crouch. Not quickly, he sank down with perfect control until he was sitting on the floor beside her, his back straight, his hands resting on his knees. The silence became something else entirely. Sophia stared at him. His profile was sharp as cut glass, his expression unreadable. He wasn't looking at the nobles anymore. He was looking straight ahead, toward the tall windows where the sky outside was still dark, but graying at the edges. Dawn was coming. "Your Majesty," Klaus said again, and his voice cracked on the second word. "We were just the tradition. We were—" "I know what you were doing," the Vampire King said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall like he'd shouted. "English," Sophia noted distantly, with an accent she couldn't place, something old and continental. "I am sitting on the floor. You are standing above your king. Do you not think this is a strange arrangement?" Klaus made a strangled sound. Then, and Sophia would have laughed if she'd had the breath for it, he dropped to his knees. Within seconds, Every noble in the room was doing the same, sinking down in a rustle of expensive fabric, their faces pale even by vampire standards. "Better," the king said, and there might have been the ghost of dark humor in his tone. "Now we are all equals. Is this not more comfortable?" No one answered. Sophia became aware that her hands were shaking. The vampire king turned his head slightly, and for the first time he looked directly at her. His eyes were indeed black, or so dark a brown that the difference didn't matter. They were ancient eyes, she thought, old in a way that had nothing to do with the smooth perfection of his face. "Are you injured?" he asked, and his voice was gentler now, meant only for her. Sophia swallowed. "My wrist and my shoulder. Nothing broken." He nodded slightly. "Good. That is good." He looked back at the kneeling nobles. "The chase will not occur this morning. You will return to your rooms. Tomorrow evening, you will return to your own estates. This lodge is closed for the season." "Your Majesty," a woman protested, "the chase has been tradition for—" "I am aware of how long it has been tradition," the king said, and his voice dropped into a register that made Sophia's spine straighten instinctively. "I am significantly older than any tradition you can name. The lodge is closed. If you would like to debate this, you may continue kneeling until you see the wisdom in silence." No one debated it. The nobles began to stand slowly and to file out of the great hall. They gave Sophia and the king a wide berth, as though proximity might contaminate them. Klaus was one of the last to leave, his face flushed with humiliation and anger, and Sophia filed that expression away in her memory. She'd write it down later, add it to her notes. When they were alone, the other servants having disappeared like smoke, the vampire king stood. He offered Sophia his hand. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then took it. His skin was cool and smooth, and his grip was careful as he drew her to her feet. Her wrist throbbed and her knees ached, but she stayed upright. "Thank you," she said, and was pleased that her voice didn't shake. "Do not thank me yet," he said. "I have only postponed the problem, not solved it. But you may consider yourself safe for tonight." He released her hand. "What is your name?" "Sophia Oakes." "Sophia," he repeated, as though testing the shape of it. "You have worked here long?" 3 years. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or reassessment. 3 years, and you have survived 3 seasons of the chase. It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "I'm good at hiding." "I imagine you would have to be." He studied her for a moment longer, and Sophia had the uncomfortable sensation that he was seeing more than she wanted to show. Then he inclined his head, a small, formal gesture that seemed to belong to a different century. "Sleep, if you can. Tomorrow evening we will speak again." He left through the same door he'd entered, moving with that preternatural vampire silence, and Sophia was alone in the great hall with spilled blood, wine staining the parquet, and her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't go to her room. She went to the library instead, to the corner desk where she kept her research materials. Her hands were steadier now as she pulled out the notebook labeled Folklore and Oral Traditions of Southern Bavaria and opened it to the page marked with a faded ribbon. In the margins, in her smallest handwriting, she wrote the date and a brief entry. "Chase canceled by direct order of O. Blackthorn. Klaus and approximately 28 others present. H.M. sat on floor rather than command from height. Nobles complied immediately." Only after she'd finished writing did she let herself think about what had happened. The vampire king had knelt beside her. He'd made every noble in the room kneel rather than let her be alone on the floor. That wasn't mercy. That was theater, a public statement she didn't yet understand. Outside the library windows, the sky was gray-pink with dawn. Sophia closed her notebook and went to find coffee. She wouldn't sleep, not today. Today she needed to think. The lodge was different after the nobles left. Quieter, but also tense. The other servants didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Sophia kept to herself, worked her shifts in the kitchen and the scullery, and waited. The vampire king had said tomorrow evening. She believed him. He appeared in the library 2 nights later, when Sophia was alone with her notebooks and a pot of tea that had long since gone cold. "You are a scholar," he said from the doorway. Not a question. Sophia looked up. He was dressed the same way, all black, and in the lamplight his hair gleamed like frost. "I was. I'm a servant now." "Those things are not mutually exclusive." He moved into the library, his gaze sweeping across the shelves. "Folklore, you said, an unusual subject." "I think folklore tells us more about people than history does. History is written by whoever wins. Folklore is written by whoever survives." Sophia closed her notebook, covering the margins with her palm. "Why did you close the lodge?" The vampire king she really needed to learn his name, or how to address him properly, turned to look at her. "Direct, aren't you? You said we'd speak again. I assume you had a reason for wanting to." A ghost of something crossed his face, amusement maybe, or approval. "My name is Octavian Blackthorn. You may call me Octavian when we are private, though I would recommend your majesty in company. I closed the lodge because the chase is a barbarism that reflects poorly on my court." "You could have closed it any time in the last century," Sophia said. "Why now?" Octavian was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the chair across from her desk and sat, folding his hands in his lap. "You are not going to make this easy, are you?" "Why should I?" "Indeed." He regarded her steadily. "I closed it now because I walked into that hall and saw you on the floor and 30 aristocrats laughing, and I realized that I had been complicit through inaction. That is the truth, Miss Oakes. It is not particularly flattering, but it is true." Sophia believed him. She didn't know why he was a vampire, a king, a creature who'd lived, for God knew how many centuries, but something in his voice convinced her. "The nobles won't accept it," she said. "They'll fight to have the chase reinstated." "I know. Their families control territories, resources. You can't afford to alienate them." Octavian's mouth curved just slightly. "You understand politics." "I understand leverage," Sophia said. "I've been documenting the chase for 3 years. Every servant who's been hurt or killed, every incident, dates and names and witnesses. I have testimony from people who survived and people who knew those who didn't. I have patterns certain nobles who participated more than others, injuries that were clearly deliberate, deaths that were ruled accidents but weren't." She opened her notebook, turned it so he could see the dense marginal notes. "You want to end the chase permanently? I have the evidence to justify it, but I need someone with the authority to act on it." Octavian leaned forward, his dark eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. He reached out, hesitated, then looked at her for permission. Sophia nodded. He took the notebook and began to read. The silence stretched. Sophia watched his face, looking for reactions: disgust, anger, dismissal. What she saw was something more complicated. His jaw tightened as he read. His fingers whitened slightly on the edges of the paper. When he finally looked up, his expression was carefully controlled. 3 years, he said quietly. "You have been doing this for 3 years." "Yes." "Alone." "I couldn't exactly ask for help." Octavian closed the notebook and handed it back to her. "How old are you, Sophia Oakes?" 23. 23, he repeated. "You were 20 when you started this project. What made you think you could survive long enough to finish it?" Sophia set the notebook down on her desk, aligned it precisely with the edge. "I didn't think I could. I thought I'd probably die or get turned or fired, and someone else would find the notes eventually. But I kept not dying, so I kept writing. That is either very brave or very foolish. It can be both." Octavian stood, began to pace. The library was small, and the space felt smaller with him in it. If I read this into the record and issue a decree abolishing the chase, based on these testimonies, the noble families will revolt. Not with armies, not yet, but politically, economically. They will withdraw their support, their tithes, their cooperation. My southern border is held by families whose children you have named in these margins. They will see this as an attack. It is an attack, Sophia said. Yes, and it may cost me stability I have spent decades building. He stopped pacing, turned to face her. Why should I do this? Explain it to me. Not with justice, not with morality. I have lived too long to be moved by abstracts. Explain it to me in concrete terms. Sophia stood up. She was still sore from being thrown to the floor, and facing a vampire king in a midnight library should have terrified her, but she felt oddly calm. Because if you don't, this will keep happening. The chase, or something like it. Nobles will keep treating humans as entertainment, and every decree you issue saying otherwise will be ignored because everyone knows you won't enforce it. And eventually someone, maybe me, maybe someone else, will compile enough evidence that it reaches the human governments. Germany is modern now. The EU has regulations. You think the human world will tolerate organized hunts of their citizens once they have proof? They'll come for you, for all of you, and they'll have legal and moral justification. You close the chase now, publicly, with evidence and real consequences, and you set a precedent. You prove that vampire law actually governs vampires. That's worth more than stability. That's legitimacy. Octavian stared at her. Then slowly he began to smile. It transformed his face, made him look less like a marble statue and more like a person. You have thought about this. I've had 3 years to think about it. And if I agree, if I do this, what do you want in return? The chase ended permanently, Sophia said immediately. The lodge seized and repurposed for something that actually helps people, and the nobles who participated prosecuted under vampire law. Not all of them, just the ringleaders. Klaus and his core group. I want them to face actual consequences, not just a slap on the wrist. Klaus von Hartmann, Octavian said. Yes, I know him. His father controls the Alpine passes. This will be expensive for me. Then make it expensive for them too. Octavian regarded her for a long moment. You are not asking for money, or safety, or a position in my court. Those would be the traditional requests. I don't want to be safe, Sophia said. I want to be finished. He nodded slowly. Very well. Bring me your notebooks tomorrow evening, all of them. I will read every entry, and then we will decide how to proceed. He left, and Sophia sat down hard in her chair. Her hands were shaking again. She'd just negotiated with the vampire king. She'd told him what to do, more or less, and he'd listened. Either she was very lucky or she'd just made a catastrophic mistake. She decided it didn't matter which. Over the next week, Sophia brought Octavian her notebooks. There were 7 in total, each one disguised as academic research, each one filled with meticulous documentation. He read them in the lodge's private study, and Sophia sat with him, answering questions when he had them, clarifying details. This entry, he said on the 4th night, pointing to a page. March 2021. Maria Kessler, age 19, broken ribs and punctured lung. You wrote that she survived but left service. Do you know where she went? Munich, Sophia said. She's working at a bakery near the university. I have her address. Would she testify? If she believed she'd be protected, yes. Octavian made a note on a separate piece of paper. He'd been compiling lists, potential witnesses, nobles to be charged, families that would need political management. His handwriting was precise and old-fashioned, and watching him work was oddly mesmerizing. This is going to take months, Sophia said. Maybe years, building a case this size. I am aware. You'll have to bring in lawyers, human lawyers probably, if you want this to hold up under international scrutiny. Also aware. And the nobles will fight every step. They'll claim tradition, cultural practice, sovereignty. Octavian looked up from the notebook. Sophia, I have been king for 300 years. I know how to manage a political crisis. I'm not questioning your competence, Sophia said. I'm questioning your commitment. 3 months from now, when the Alpine families are threatening secession and Klaus's father is calling in favors, are you still going to care about this? Or are you going to decide it's easier to let it go? She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. Octavian's expression went very still. I apologize, Sophia said quickly. That was inappropriate. No, Octavian said quietly. It was fair. He set down the notebook. You want to know why I will not let this go? The truth. Yes, He stood, walked to the study's window. Outside, the Bavarian forest was dark and deep, snow beginning to dust the pines. 200 years ago, my sister had a human companion, not a servant, a friend. Companion is the formal term, but they were closer than that. Her name was Ilse. She was a musician, a violinist. She played for us sometimes, in the evenings. I remember her hands. She had these long fingers, very elegant, and when she played, it was like the music came from somewhere beyond her. Sophia waited. Ilse attended a chase, Octavian continued. As an observer, she thought. My sister's guest. But the nobles that year decided that companions were fair game too. They went after her. My sister tried to intervene, but she was young, not strong enough to stop them. By the time I arrived, Ilse was dead. The silence in the study was absolute. I executed the 3 nobles responsible, Octavian said. Publicly, without trial. It nearly started a civil war. The families demanded justice, claimed I had overreached my authority, that the chase's rules were sovereign. I managed to keep the peace, but only by agreeing that the chase itself would continue. I told myself it was necessary, that 3 deaths were enough, that I could not afford to lose the loyalty of half my court over a tradition, however barbaric. He turned to face Sophia. I have regretted that decision for 2 centuries. When I walked into that hall and saw you on the floor, I saw Ilse, and I decided I would not make the same choice twice. Sophia's throat felt tight. I'm sorry about your sister's friend. So am I. Octavian returned to his chair. So when you ask whether I will remain committed to this, the answer is yes. I will see it through, regardless of the cost. You have my word, for what that is worth. It's worth something, Sophia said quietly. They worked through the night, and when dawn began to gray the sky, Octavian walked Sophia back to the servants' quarters. They didn't speak, but the silence felt different now, less like tension and more like understanding. The case took 4 months to build. Octavian brought in lawyers, both vampire and human, who specialized in international law and treaty rights. They interviewed witnesses Maria Kessler and 14 others who agreed to testify. Sophia's notebooks were authenticated, cross-referenced, verified. The evidence was overwhelming. Klaus von Hartmann and 6 other nobles were formally charged under vampire law with assault, reckless endangerment, and violation of protection statutes. The charges were public, read into the court record in front of witnesses. The noble families exploded, exactly as predicted. Sophia wasn't present for the political maneuvering that happened in council chambers and private meetings she wasn't cleared to attend, but she saw the effects. 3 families withdrew their tithes. 2 recalled their representatives from court. There were rumors of secession, of borders closing, of trade routes being rerouted. Octavian remained calm through all of it, at least outwardly. But Sophia noticed the tension in his shoulders when he thought no one was watching, the way his hands would curl into fists and then deliberately relax. They're making you pay for this, she said one evening. They were in the study again. It had become their customary meeting place. The Alpine families especially. Yes. Can you afford it? No, Octavian said frankly. Not indefinitely, but I am gambling that I will not have to. Klaus's father is the linchpin. If I can bring him around, the others will follow. How do you bring him around? Octavian's smile was sharp. By giving him a choice between losing his son to prosecution or offering a public apology and reparations. Pride is expensive, but sons are irreplaceable. That's cold. That's politics. Sophia leaned back in her chair. Do you enjoy this? The maneuvering, the strategy? Octavian considered the question. No, I am good at it, but I do not enjoy it. What I enjoy is the result, stability, order, the knowledge that my decisions have protected people. The process is simply what one endures to reach the result. That sounds exhausting. It is. He looked at her. Is folklore less exhausting? Folklore is dead people and old stories, much less stressful. Sophia smiled. Though, apparently I'm not very good at staying with dead people and old stories. No, Octavian said softly. You are very good at getting involved in live people and present problems. It is one of your more alarming qualities. There was something in his tone that made Sophia's pulse quicken. They'd been spending nearly every evening together for months now, and somewhere along the way the dynamic had shifted. She'd stopped thinking of him as the vampire king and started thinking of him as Octavian, the man who read her notebooks with painstaking care, who remembered every witness's name, who sometimes looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in a room full of centuries-old artifacts. It was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. He was immortal, and she was human. He was a king, and she was a former scholar, turned servant, turned accidental activist. There was no future in whatever this was. But when he looked at her like that, Sophia found it hard to care. "I should go," she said, standing up. "It's late." "Sophia," Octavian said, and she stopped. "Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for listening." She left before she could say anything else. The trial happened on a cold November evening in the council chamber. Sophia was called as a witness, and she testified for 3 hours, walking the assembled nobles through her documentation. Klaus von Hartmann sat in the defendant's chair, his handsome face carefully blank, his father beside him. When Sophia finished, Octavian stood. He was wearing formal robes, black velvet trimmed with silver, and he looked every inch the king. "The evidence is clear," he said. "The chase, as practiced, has resulted in systematic harm to humans under our protection. This is not tradition. This is negligence, and it ends now. I am issuing a decree, effective immediately. The chase is abolished. The lodge is seized by the crown and will be repurposed. The 7 nobles charged will face sentencing as follows." He outlined the sentences: reparations, public apologies, suspension from court. Klaus received the harshest penalty: 10 years suspension and personal reparations to every witness. His father's face was stone. When it was done, the chamber erupted. Nobles shouted, some in approval, most in fury. Octavian let them shout. When they finally quieted, he said simply, "The decree is law. Challenge it at your peril." He left the chamber, and Sophia followed at a distance. She found him in the study, standing by the window, his shoulders rigid. "Octavian," she said quietly. He turned. "It is done." "Yes. Klaus's father will hate me for the rest of his life. 3 other families have threatened to withdraw from court entirely. I may have fractured my southern alliance beyond repair." He smiled, and it was the saddest expression Sophia had ever seen on his face. "But it is done." Sophia crossed the room, and without thinking, took his hand. His fingers were cool, and they tightened around hers immediately. "You did the right thing," she said. "Did I? Ask me in 10 years, when the Alpine passes are hostile and trade has collapsed." "I'll ask you now," Sophia said. "Look at me." He did. "You ended something that killed people. You gave witnesses a voice and nobles consequences. You proved that your laws mean something. That's worth more than trade routes." "You are the only person who would say that to me," Octavian said, but his grip on her hand didn't loosen. They stood like that, hands linked, until Sophia's courage finally outpaced her common sense. "What happens now?" "Now we manage the fallout, and hope that I have not destroyed my kingdom for the sake of my conscience. I meant with us." Octavian went very still. "Sophia, I know," she said quickly. "I know it's impossible. You're immortal. I'm human. You're a king. I'm whatever I am now. But I need to know if I'm imagining this, or if you feel it too." For a long moment, Octavian didn't speak. Then he lifted his free hand and brushed his knuckles against her cheek, feather-light. "I feel it," he said quietly.
"I have felt it since the night I sat beside you on the floor and you looked at me like I was a person, not a title. You are brilliant and brave and infuriating, and I have not felt this way about anyone in over a century. So no, you are not imagining it." Sophia's breath caught. "What do we do?" "That depends." His thumb traced along her jaw. "What do you want?" "I want you," Sophia said.
"However that works, for however long it lasts." Octavian closed his eyes briefly. "It will last as long as your life. That is not negotiable." I will not turn you unless you ask, and I will not allow you to make that choice lightly. I know. And there will be those who see you as a weakness, a liability. You will be in danger simply by being connected to me. I've been in danger for 3 years. I'm used to it. Octavian opened his eyes. You are going to be the end of me, Sophia Oakes. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might break. Then Sophia's arms went around his neck, and she kissed him back, and gentle became something else urgent and deep and full of months of restrained longing. When they finally broke apart, Octavian was smiling. That was inadvisable. Terrible idea, Sophia agreed, breathless. I am going to do it again. Please do. He did. The fallout from the trial was brutal. 2 families withdrew from court entirely. The Alpine passes became contested territory. Trade revenues dropped by 15%. Klaus's father began quietly building alliances, positioning himself as an alternative power center. Through it all, Octavian remained steady. He negotiated, compromised where he could, held firm where he couldn't. And every evening, he returned to the study where Sophia was waiting. She moved out of the servants' quarters. It was Octavian's idea, you are not a servant anymore, if you ever truly were. And he set her up in a suite of rooms in the residential wing. She returned to her academic work, this time with proper funding and resources. Her subject shifted from folklore to contemporary vampire-human relations, and she became a consultant on legal reforms. The relationship became public knowledge within a month. The court's reaction was mixed, some approved, seeing Sophia as a humanizing influence on their king. Others were scandalized, convinced she was a distraction at best and a manipulative commoner at worst. Sophia learned to ignore the whispers. She'd survived the chase. She could survive courtly gossip. 6 months after the trial, on a spring evening when the lodge was being prepared for its new purpose, Octavian came to her rooms with a strange expression on his face. What's wrong? Sophia asked. Nothing is wrong, but I need you to come with me. There is something you should see. He took her to the council chamber. Inside, standing awkwardly near the door, was a young man with white blonde hair and pale skin. It took Sophia a moment to recognize him. Klaus von Hartmann. She tensed immediately. Octavian's hand found hers, steadying. Miss Oakes, Klaus said. His voice was different from the last time she'd heard it, quieter, stripped of arrogance. I came to apologize. Properly. Not because the sentence requires it, though it does. Because you deserve to hear it. He swallowed. I participated in the chase for 5 years. I thought it was tradition, sport, something that didn't really matter. I didn't think about the people involved. I didn't think about you. He met her eyes. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I hurt people because it was entertaining, and that is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life. I am sorry. That is inadequate, but it is true. Sophia stared at him. What changed? You did, Klaus said simply. You and your testimony. Hearing those names, those dates, realizing that every time I participated, someone documented it. Someone remembered. Someone cared enough to write it down. He looked at Octavian. And watching His Majesty sacrifice political stability to hold me accountable, that changed something too. What are you going to do now? Sophia asked. My father wants me to fight the sentence, to challenge the decree. I am refusing. Instead, I am working with the families who supported the abolition. We are trying to build a coalition for reform. It is slow, and many do not trust me. But I am trying. He hesitated. I do not expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know. Sophia took a breath. I don't forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I appreciate you coming here. Klaus nodded. That is more than I deserve. Thank you. He left, and Sophia turned to Octavian. Did you arrange this? No. He contacted me last week, asked if he could speak with you. I told him the choice was yours. And you thought I'd say yes. I thought you would want to see that your work is having consequences beyond punishment. That it is changing minds, not just enforcing rules. Octavian studied her face. Was I wrong? No, Sophia said slowly. No, you weren't wrong. It just caught me off guard. He is sincere, I believe. Naive still. Overly optimistic about how quickly people change, but sincere. Can we trust him? Not yet, but perhaps eventually. Octavian drew her close. You have started something, Sophia, something larger than the chase, larger than one decree. People are questioning traditions now, asking whether age makes something right. You did that. Sophia leaned against him. We did that. If you prefer. They stood in the empty council chamber, and Sophia thought about Klaus's face, younger than she'd realized, full of guilt and uncertain hope. She thought about the lodge, which would reopen next month as a training school for human and vampire cooperation. She thought about the witnesses who'd testified, who'd walked out of that chamber with their heads high. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever fully erase the harm that had been done. But it was something. It was a start. A year after the decree, Sophia asked Octavian about turning. They were in his private chambers she'd all but moved in, though she kept her own suite for propriety's sake, and she'd been thinking about it for months, working up the courage to ask. I do not want to lose you, Octavian said carefully, but I also do not want to take your mortality unless you are certain. This is not a decision you can undo. I know that. Do you? Truly? He took her hands. Sophia, if I turn you, you will live for centuries. Millennia, perhaps. You will watch the human world change and change again. You will outlive every mortal you know. That is not romantic. It is grief, over and over, for the rest of your existence. You think I haven't thought about that? I think you are 24 and in love, and those are not ideal conditions for making irreversible choices. Sophia pulled her hands back. I'm not some naive child, Octavian. I've spent the last year learning what it means to exist in your world. I've seen the politics, the violence, the compromises. I know what I'd be agreeing to. Then why? He asked, and his voice was raw. Why would you choose this? Because I want to finish what I started, Sophia said. The chase is abolished, but that's one tradition in one region. There are dozens of others, blood tithes, binding contracts, laws that treat humans as property. If I stay mortal, I have maybe 60 years to work on this. If I turn, I have centuries. I can build something lasting. And yes, because I love you. And the idea of having 30 years with you and then leaving you alone is unbearable. But it's not just that. I want this. Octavian closed his eyes. If I do this and you come to regret it, then I'll regret it, Sophia interrupted. But it will be my choice to regret. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I know my own mind. He opened his eyes. When? Not yet, Sophia said. I want to go back to Munich first. See my family, my friends. Say goodbye to my mortal life properly. But soon, before I lose my nerve. You will not lose your nerve, Octavian said with absolute certainty. That is not who you are. The trip to Munich took a week. Sophia visited her mother, who'd been horrified when Sophia first explained her involvement with the vampire court and had slowly come to accept it. She had coffee with Maria Kessler, who was thriving at her bakery and had started a support group for former lodge servants. She walked through the university where she'd studied folklore, visited her favorite bookshop, ate schnitzel at her favorite restaurant. When she returned to the lodge, she felt ready. Octavian turned her on a winter evening, in his chambers, with moonlight streaming through the windows. It was gentler than she'd expected, his teeth at her throat, sharp and precise, and then the slow pull of her blood. She'd been afraid it would hurt, but instead it felt like falling asleep, floating, drifting away from herself. Then he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her mouth, and she drank. The taste was strange, metallic and sweet and ancient, like drinking history. She felt it spread through her, cold at first and then burning, rewriting her from the inside out. Her heart stuttered, stopped, started again with a different rhythm. Her vision sharpened until she could see the individual threads in the tapestry on the wall. Her hearing expanded until she could hear Octavian's breath, the rustle of fabric, the wind outside. When it was done, she looked up at him. His face was still beautiful, but now she could see the minute details, the faint scar on his temple, The exact shade of his eyes, the way his expression shifted from concern to relief when she smiled. "Hello," she said, and her voice sounded different, clearer. "Hello," Octavian replied, and he was smiling too. "How do you feel?" "Strange. Good. Hungry, actually." He laughed, and it was the most human sound she'd ever heard from him. "That is normal. Come, we will find you something to eat, and then we will see what kind of vampire you become." The adjustment took months. Sophia learned to control her new strength, her speed, the overwhelming sensory input. She learned to feed without hurting anyone, to navigate vampire social structures as one of them rather than an outsider. She learned to manage the hunger, the occasional viciousness that came with predatory instincts. Through it all, Octavian was patient. He taught her, protected her when she stumbled, celebrated her victories. And slowly, Sophia began to feel at home in her new existence. The work continued. With Klaus's unexpected support, they built a coalition for reform. More traditions were examined, challenged, abolished, or modified. Sophia became a recognized voice in vampire-human relations, publishing articles, testifying before councils, pushing for change. It was slow, frustrating work. For every victory, there were 3 setbacks. But progress was happening. 2 years after her turning, the lodge reopened officially. It was a clear November evening, the first snow dusting the pines, and the great hall was full of people, human and vampire, students and teachers, witnesses and reformers. Klaus was there, working with the curriculum committee. Maria was there, having agreed to share her story with the first cohort. Octavian's sister, Lavinia, had come from the Eastern Territories, her presence a sign of familial approval. Sophia stood at the front of the hall, looking out at the crowd. Octavian was beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "This is what you wanted," he said quietly. "When you started documenting the chase, this moment." "This is better than what I wanted," Sophia admitted. "I thought maybe I'd get a decree and some prosecutions. I didn't imagine this." "You should have imagined bigger." She turned to look at him. "Are you happy? Truly?" Octavian considered the question. "Happy is a complicated word when one has lived as long as I have. But yes, I am happy. I am proud. I am grateful that you dragged me into this." "I didn't drag you. You sat down on the floor all by yourself." "Because you were worth sitting beside." He lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles. "And you remain worth it. Every political crisis, every lost alliance, every noble who looks at me like I have betrayed them. Worth it." The ceremony began. There were speeches from Octavian, from the school's director, from one of the witnesses. Sophia spoke last, keeping it brief. She talked about the power of documentation, of bearing witness, of refusing to let harm be forgotten. She talked about the people who'd survived and the ones who hadn't. And she talked about the future, the work still to be done, the traditions still to be challenged, the world they were slowly building together. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, there was a dinner, long tables set up in the great hall, humans and vampires sitting together, eating and talking and laughing. Sophia sat beside Octavian, with Klaus across from them and Maria to her right. It was strange and wonderful and surreal. "I have a confession," Klaus said midway through the meal. "I used to think tradition was inherently valuable. That age made something sacred. But watching all of this, watching the school come together, seeing how much better the lodge serves people now, I realize I was just afraid of change, of admitting that my ancestors might have been wrong." "Most people are afraid of that," Sophia said. "Admitting your ancestors were wrong feels like betraying them. But sometimes betrayal is the right choice." "Philosophy from a former folklore student," Klaus said, but he was smiling. "Your professors would be proud." "My professors thought I was wasting my time on oral histories," Sophia said. "They wanted me to focus on textual analysis, proper academic work. I think they'd be horrified to see where the oral histories led me." "To vampire queenship?" Maria suggested innocently. Sophia choked on her wine. "I am not a queen." "You are the vampire king's partner," Maria pointed out. "What else would we call you?" "Consultant, researcher, very persistent academic." Octavian leaned over. She refuses the title, he said to Maria. I have offered it repeatedly. She is stubborn. I'm practical, Sophia corrected. Titles come with expectations I don't want to meet. I'd rather do the work than attend state functions. You will have to attend some state functions eventually, Octavian said. It is unavoidable. Then I will avoid it as long as possible. The dinner lasted until well past midnight. When it finally ended, Sophia and Octavian walked through the lodge together, checking that everything was in order. The building felt different now, lighter, full of purpose instead of dread. They ended up in the library where Sophia's notebooks were now preserved in a locked case. She ran her fingers along the glass. Do you ever regret it? Octavian asked. The documentation, the trial, everything that came after. No, Sophia said immediately. Do you? No, though I regret that you had to be the one to do it. You should have been finishing your doctorate, publishing papers on folklore. Instead, you risked your life compiling evidence of atrocities. I chose that, Sophia said, and honestly, it was better than the alternative, better than hiding, pretending I didn't see what was happening. Octavian pulled her close. You are extraordinary, Sophia Oakes. I'm really not. I just wrote things down. You wrote things down for 3 years in a lodge where people were hunted for sport, knowing that if anyone found your notes, you would be killed. That is extraordinary. Sophia leaned against him. Okay, maybe a little extraordinary. They left the library and walked back to Octavian's chambers. The lodge was quiet now, settling into its new purpose. Through the windows, Sophia could see the forest, dark and peaceful, snow-covered, beautiful. I want to stay here for a while, she said. At the lodge. Make sure the school is running smoothly, that the students feel safe. Then we will stay, Octavian said. Don't you have kingdom business? Council meetings, political crises, the usual? I have advisors. I can manage from here for a few months. He smiled. Besides, if I return to court without you, the rumors will become unbearable. They already think you have me under some kind of spell. Don't I? Perhaps. He kissed her forehead. But if so, it is a spell I choose willingly. They stayed at the lodge for the rest of the winter. Sophia taught a class on documentation and witness testimony. Octavian held council meetings remotely, managing the kingdom's politics via video calls and carefully worded letters. Klaus became a regular visitor, his earnest idealism tempered by practical experience. In February, Lavinia visited again. She was older than Octavian by a century, with the same white hair and dark eyes, and she carried herself with an authority that made even Octavian defer to her occasionally. She cornered Sophia in the library one evening. I wanted to meet you properly, she said, the human who changed my brother's mind. I'm not human anymore, Sophia pointed out. No, but you were when it mattered. Lavinia sat down, gestured for Sophia to join her. Octavian told me about Ilsa, about how seeing you on the floor reminded him of her. I'm sorry for your loss, Sophia said. It was 200 years ago. The grief has dulled. Lavinia's expression softened. But I am grateful that Octavian found someone who made him remember, who made him care enough to act. He has been lonely for a very long time, though he would never admit it. He's not lonely anymore, Sophia said. No, he is not. Lavinia studied her. Do you intend to marry him? The question caught Sophia off guard. We haven't discussed it. You should. He is traditional about some things, and he will want to formalize the bond eventually. Better to be prepared. I'll keep that in mind. Lavinia stood. You are good for him, Sophia Oakes. Do not let the court convince you otherwise. They will try. They are suspicious of anyone who changes the status quo. But you have my support, for what it is worth. It's worth a lot, Sophia said. Thank you. After Lavinia left, Sophia thought about the marriage question. She and Octavian had been together for over 2 years now, and it had never occurred to her to formalize it. They were partners, lovers, collaborators. Did they need a ceremony to confirm that? She decided to ask him. Marriage, Octavian repeated when she brought it up that night. They were in bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. That is what you were thinking about at midnight? Your sister thinks we should discuss it. Lavinia is a meddler, Is she wrong? Octavian was quiet for a moment. No, I have thought about it. I simply did not want to pressure you. How would asking me to marry you be pressure? Because you are young, still adjusting to immortality, and I am significantly older and more powerful than you. There is an inherent imbalance. He shifted so he could see her face. I want you to choose me freely, Sophia. Not because you feel obligated or because vampire tradition demands it. I chose you when I asked you to turn me, Sophia said. That was the commitment as far as I'm concerned. But if you want a ceremony, we can do that too. Do you want a ceremony? I want whatever makes you happy. Octavian smiled. That is not an answer. Fine. I want a small ceremony, very private, with only people we actually like. And I do not want a traditional vampire wedding, because those last 3 nights and involve blood oaths that sound terrifying. They are terrifying. That is half the point. Octavian kissed her. A small ceremony, I can arrange that. Are you proposing? Do you want me to propose properly? I can find a ring, arrange something romantic. Or you could just say, yes, we'll get married. Yes, Octavian said. We will get married. Good, Sophia said, and kissed him. They married in the spring, in the lodge's library, with 15 people in attendance. Lavinia officiated, using a ceremony she'd composed herself that blended vampire tradition with modern simplicity. Klaus was there, looking uncomfortable in formal attire. Maria was there, beaming. A handful of council members Octavian actually respected attended, along with the school's director and 2 of the Reform Coalition's leaders. Sophia wore a simple white dress. Octavian wore black velvet. They exchanged ring silver with intricate engravings and promises that were private, meant only for each other. When it was done, Lavinia pronounced them married, and everyone applauded. The reception was held in the Great Hall, which had been decorated with candles and spring flowers. There was food, wine, music from a string quartet. Sophia danced with Octavian, then with Klaus, then with Maria. You look happy, Maria said as they swayed to the music. I am happy, Sophia admitted. It's strange. 3 years ago I was terrified and alone, documenting atrocities and expecting to die. Now I'm married to the Vampire King and helping run a school. Life is weird. Life is good, Maria corrected. You earned this, Sophia. All of it. So did you. The bakery, the support group, you built something too. Maria smiled. We all did. That's the point, isn't it? That one person starts something, and then others join in, and eventually it becomes bigger than any of us. Spoken like a philosopher. Spoken like someone who survived and decided to make it mean something. The reception lasted until dawn. When the last guest left, Sophia and Octavian collapsed onto the sofa in his chambers. That was exhausting, Sophia said. You loved it. I loved parts of it. The ceremony was lovely. The speeches were too long. Klaus's speech was particularly long, Octavian agreed. I think he was nervous. He's always nervous. It's his default state. Sophia turned to look at Octavian. Are you happy? I am happy, Octavian said. I am married to the most infuriating, brilliant woman I have ever met. The lodge is thriving. The reforms are progressing. My sister approves of my life choices for the first time in 2 centuries. Yes, Sophia, I am happy. Good, Sophia said, and settled against him. Then we did something right. The years that followed were full. Sophia continued her work, expanding beyond the chase to tackle other exploitative traditions. She published articles, testified before councils, built alliances with human governments. Octavian ruled, navigated politics, kept the fragile peace between reform-minded vampires and traditionalists. They traveled together when they could to Vienna for a treaty negotiation, to Paris for a symposium on vampire-human relations, to London to visit Lavinia's estate. They spent quiet evenings in the library, reading and working side by side. They argued about politics, about strategy, about whether Klaus was genuinely reformed or just very good at performing contrition. 5 years after their marriage, the Alpine families finally accepted the chase's abolition. It was a formal ceremony with apologies and reparations, and Klaus's father, now elderly and frail, personally delivered the family's acknowledgement that they'd been wrong. It only took 5 years, Sophia said afterward, watching the family's delegation leave. Change is slow, Octavian said, but it happens. You taught me that. 10 years after the decree, the lodge's school graduated its first cohort. Sophia attended the ceremony, watched students human and vampire receive their certifications in conflict resolution and cultural mediation. She gave a short speech about the power of persistence, and when she finished, the applause was deafening. That night, she and Octavian walked through the forest surrounding the lodge. The trees were thick with summer leaves, the air warm and alive with insect song. "I've been thinking," Sophia said, "about expanding the school, opening branches in other regions. The demand is there, and we've proven the model works." "That will require funding," Octavian said, "and political negotiation. Many regions will resist." "I know, but I think it's worth doing." Octavian took her hand. "Then we will do it. Together." They walked deeper into the forest, and Sophia thought about the girl she'd been 20 years old, terrified, alone in a lodge where people were hunted for sport. That girl had survived by hiding, by documenting, by refusing to look away from horror, even when it would have been easier to pretend she didn't see it. That girl had grown into someone different, someone stronger, more certain, capable of standing beside a king and demanding change, someone who'd learned that justice was slow and imperfect, and always worth fighting for. "Thank you," Sophia said quietly. Octavian looked at her. "For what?" "For sitting beside me on the floor, for listening, for choosing this path even when it was expensive." "You are welcome," Octavian said, "though I think we both know that you gave me no real choice. Once you showed me those notebooks, I could not unsee them. You could have ignored them." "No," Octavian said, "I could not. Not and remain the person I wished to be." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "I love you, Sophia. I have loved you since the night you negotiated with me like I was a colleague and not a king. I will love you for as long as we both exist. That is not gratitude or obligation. It is simply truth." Sophia felt her throat tighten. "I love you too, even when you're being insufferably noble." "Especially when I am being insufferably noble," Octavian corrected, and kissed her. They stood in the forest, surrounded by trees that had witnessed centuries of history, and Sophia thought about the future, the schools they'd build, the laws they'd change, the traditions they'd challenge. The work would never be finished. There would always be another injustice, another fight, another crisis. But they would face it together. And that, Sophia thought, was enough. 20 years after the decree, the lodge held a reunion. Witnesses, reformers, students, everyone who'd been part of the movement gathered to celebrate what they'd built. The great hall was full of laughter, genuine laughter this time, joyful and free. Klaus gave a speech about redemption and second chances. Maria talked about healing and community. Octavian spoke about the courage it took to challenge power, to demand better, to refuse to accept that harm was inevitable. Sophia spoke last. She talked about the night she'd been dragged to the floor, about the laughter that had surrounded her, about the terror of realizing she was about to become prey. And she talked about what happened next, the vampire king who knelt beside her, the alliance they'd built, the world they'd changed together. "None of this was easy," she said, "and none of it is finished. But we proved something important, that traditions can be challenged, that power can be held accountable, and that justice is possible when people refuse to give up. So thank you, all of you, for refusing to give up." The applause was overwhelming. Sophia stepped down from the podium and found Octavian waiting. He wrapped his arms around her, and she leaned into him, letting the sound of celebration wash over them. "We did it," she said. "You did it," Octavian corrected. "I merely provided institutional support. You provided significantly more than that, if you insist." They stayed at the reunion until dawn, talking and laughing and remembering. When it finally ended, they walked back to their chambers together, hands linked, moving through the lodge that had once been a place of horror and was now a place of hope. "What do you want to do next?" Octavian asked. Sophia thought about it. "I want to write a book, a comprehensive history of the chase and its abolition. I want to preserve the testimonies, make sure they're never forgotten. A folklore student to the end," Octavian said, smiling. "Always." They reached their chambers. The sky outside was lightening with dawn, and Sophia could feel the pull of sleep. She and Octavian settled into bed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. "I am glad you survived," Octavian said quietly. "That night in the great hall. I am glad you were good at hiding." "So am I," Sophia said. "Otherwise I would never have met you. Otherwise I would have continued allowing injustice through inaction, and I would have been alone for another century. Then I suppose we saved each other." "I suppose we did." Sophia closed her eyes. Outside, the sun was rising over the Bavarian forest, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The lodge was quiet, its halls empty of fear, its future bright with possibility. She thought about the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, the centuries of work still ahead. She thought about Octavian, the king who'd learned to sit on floors and challenge his own court. She thought about Klaus, who'd surprised everyone by becoming a genuine ally. She thought about Maria and the other survivors who'd found the courage to speak. She thought about the chase, ended forever, and the tradition of laughter as cruelty replaced by something better. And then she slept, safe and loved, in a world they'd fought together to remake. The years continued to unfold, and Sophia and Octavian remained partners in every sense. They expanded the school, opened branches across Europe, and eventually beyond. They faced opposition, criticism, and occasional violence, but they faced it together, and they never stopped pushing forward. 50 years after their marriage, they stood on a balcony overlooking Vienna, watching the sunset. Sophia was still beautiful, still fierce, still asking difficult questions and refusing easy answers. Octavian was still steady, still protective, still grateful for the day he'd walked into a great hall and seen a woman on the floor who refused to be broken. "Do you ever miss mortality?" Octavian asked. "No," Sophia said. "I miss some things about it, the urgency, maybe. The sense that time was limited so everything mattered more. But I don't miss the fragility. And I definitely don't miss the idea of leaving you after 30 or 40 years. "I would have survived," Octavian said. "I know, but I didn't want you to have to." Octavian pulled her close. "Eternity is long, Sophia, and I am glad I will spend it with you. Even when I'm insufferable, especially then." They stood together as the sun set and the city lights began to glow, and Sophia thought about the path that had brought them here. It had started with cruelty and fear, with laughter that wasn't funny and a tradition that was barbaric. But it had led to this, to love, to partnership, to a shared commitment to making their world better. That night, back in their Vienna residence, they worked side by side as they always did. Sophia was drafting a proposal for a new reform council. Octavian was reviewing treaty language. The work was endless, but it was theirs, and they did it together. "I have a thought," Octavian said, looking up from his documents, "about Klaus. He has been asking to establish a school in the Alpine region, his family's territory." "Do you trust him?" Sophia asked. "I trust him more than I did 10 years ago, and significantly more than I did 20 years ago." Octavian set down his papers. "But the question is whether you trust him." Sophia considered. Klaus had proven himself over and over, working tirelessly for reform, facing down his own family's resistance, never wavering even when it cost him personally. He'd become a friend in an unlikely sort of way. "I trust him," she said. "Give him the Alpine school. He'll do it justice." "You are certain?" "I'm certain." Octavian smiled. "Then I will approve it. Your judgment has yet to fail me. There's a first time for everything. Not in this case." They returned to their work, and the night passed in comfortable silence. broken only by the scratch of pen on paper and the occasional question or comment. It was ordinary, domestic, nothing like the dramatic early years of their relationship. Sophia wouldn't have traded it for anything. Decades became centuries. The schools flourished. Vampire-human relations improved slowly but steadily. Sophia and Octavian remained at the center of it all, guiding, pushing, adapting to a changing world. They returned to the lodge often, walking its halls and remembering. The great hall where she'd fallen, where he'd sat beside her, where everything had changed. It was a classroom now, full of students learning about justice and accountability. The room held ghosts, but they were quiet ones, their stories preserved and honored. One evening, 150 years after the decree, Sophia stood in the library with her published history of the chase. The book was thick, comprehensive, filled with testimonies and analysis and hope. It had become required reading in vampire courts across the world. Octavian found her there, running her fingers along the spine of her own work. "Admiring your legacy?" he asked. "Making sure it's still here," Sophia said, "that it's real. It is very real and very impactful." He joined her at the bookshelf. "You succeeded, Sophia. The chase is a historical atrocity now, not an ongoing tradition. That is because of you." "Because of us," Sophia corrected. "If you insist." She turned to face him. "Do you remember that night, when you walked into the great hall and I was on the floor? I remember everything about that night. What made you do it? Sit down, I mean. You could have just ordered them to stop." Octavian was quiet for a moment. "I saw you on the floor, surrounded by people who thought your suffering was entertaining, and I realized that ordering them from a position of height would change nothing. Commands are easy to give and easy to ignore. But joining you, making myself vulnerable, making them see us as equals in that moment, that was harder to dismiss." He touched her face. "And I saw something in your eyes. Not fear, though you were afraid. Determination, fury. I saw someone who refused to be defeated, and I thought, this is someone worth sitting beside. You barely knew me. I knew enough." Sophia kissed him, slow and deep, and thought about all the years they'd shared, the fights and the victories, the compromises and the celebrations, the ordinary evenings and the extraordinary moments, the life they'd built together, brick by brick, decision by decision. "I love you," she said, "in case I haven't mentioned it recently." "You mentioned it this morning," Octavian said, "and yesterday evening, and the day before that. But I do not mind hearing it again." "I love you," Sophia repeated, "and I would do it all again. Every terrifying moment, every political crisis, every time Klaus gave a speech that was 20 minutes too long. All of it. Even being dragged to the floor?" "Even that," Sophia said, "because it brought you into my life, and that was worth everything." They left the library together, walking through the lodge they'd transformed from a place of horror into a beacon of hope. Outside, the Bavarian forest was dark and peaceful, the stars bright overhead. The world was changing, would always be changing, and they would keep working to change it for the better. But for tonight, they were simply together, a king and his queen, a vampire and his partner, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and built something luminous from the wreckage. And that, Sophia thought, was the best story folklore could offer, the one where love and justice met on a parquet floor, where laughter turned to silence, where a king knelt down and a servant stood up, and where they remade the world together, one choice at a time.